Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to Eileen Mueller and Ezarra, the Riders of Fire. If you love dragons, you're going to love this series. Thank you for joining us from New Zealand by Skype.
Hi, Denise. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. So explain your outfit today.
My outfit is a dragon outfit. So I have horns and gloves, but I don't have them on today. And I also have a tail back here somewhere and spines. When I go to cons to meet people, to science fiction fantasy conventions, I bring a spare set of wings and I wear these so everybody knows who I am. And I found that my spare set of wings are actually a tiny costume for a 10-year-old. But I've had people of 50, 60 and tall 6'5" men wearing them and dressing up to be a dragon so they can pose.
That's fantastic. It definitely goes with the story. So how did you come up with this story? Because it's really unique. But I really want to know also the background of dragons and their riders, because that seems to be a popular fit in fantasy.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the things that people love about dragons and riders is the bond that they get to feel. So dragons and riders experience a bond where there's telepathy and there's complete understanding. So there's acceptance of one another. And I think that's what draws readers into reading dragon fiction where there's dragon riders involved, is that sense of somebody knowing you, loving you, forgiving you when you make mistakes and knowing exactly who you are. I guess it's unconditional love. And I think that's one of the things that human beings seek. And I think a lot of readers find it when they read about dragons and riders together. So I think that draws people in. And one of the other things they really like about my stories is the action. There's a lot of action right from the first paragraph through to the end of the book.
There is. It definitely pulls you through so you can't put it down. It was a wonderful read.
Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Definitely. So what got you inspired into the whole dragon lore in the first place?
Yeah, I read a lot of dragons when I was younger. I grew up on Anne McCaffrey's series, and then when Aragon came out, my son was really into dragons, so he was reading sort of younger kids' dragon books. So in the end, I started writing them for him, but it took so long to finish them that he was way too old to read them by the time I actually completed them. Yeah. So
how many books are in the series?
There are 6 in the Riders of Fire series. And there are 2 free prequels available on my website as well, which are quite cool, shorter stories.
Oh, wow. How long did it take you to finish 6?
It took me 10 years to write the first 2, or 9 years, because I was learning how to write at that time. So my first draft was enormous. It was the size of 2 of the Lord of the Rings trilogies. And I was told I couldn't publish a book that big. So it took me years to rewrite, to learn my craft, to hone things. And finally, I became a good enough writer and then put 2 of them out together. And then the other 4 have come out over the last year and a half. So, yeah, it's been fun.
Definitely really speeded up over the years.
Yeah, it did. A lot of it was learning how to write, I think, at the beginning.
Wow, you really nailed it. It's a fantastic read, a believable relationship, and the action is so much fun. I can really see how young and old people would approach you that have read the books, because it's just that fantasy that draws you in, whisks you away.
So what did you enjoy about it?
I like the relationship between the dragons. It was surprising the way it came about. Mm-hmm. I like the social issues about adoption And just the way that you weaved it together and brought us into this, it's the way it unravels. It's hard to explain, but you unraveled it in such a way as to how they found each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the fact that the main writer didn't know that she was going to be a dragon rider.
Yeah. Yeah, she was completely ignorant. She had no idea dragons even existed. So when she gets drawn into the world, it actually takes her quite a bit of time to find her feet. And people don't like her because she's ignorant, and they're suspicious of people from that area because they don't even know about dragons. So that started her off with a nice disadvantage and a lot of obstacles to overcome, a lot of prejudice. And I think those are some of the social issues I was touching on as well. The fact that we can be prejudiced about people when we don't understand them. Yeah, so that was fun. And the action, I think I love reading books with action, and I love it when there's one thing after another that just keeps hitting you. So that's how I wanted to write my stories. And I was surprised because I wrote them for young adults, but my fans, I've had a fan who's over 100 read them. All the way down to, I had a 9-year-old read them, and I sort of said to his mother, maybe they're a little bit old for him. So she let him read the first 2 books. He hasn't gone any further. So they appeal to people of all ages because they have universal themes that people enjoy.
Definitely. And the action brings you through the results of a lot of those things: discrimination, arguments that arise, conflicts that arise, which was really well played out. So who are the characters that you love or hate the most in the series?
Okay, so you probably haven't seen Kyrian much, but he's really, really cheeky, and he's a prankster. And in book 3, at the beginning of book 3, Dragon Rift, he's played a prank where he's stolen all arrows off everybody and hidden them because he's a sword fighter. So he's against the arrow. So they call themselves blade thrusters and arrow flingers, and so they hassling each other about that. And the Kyrian's a sword fighter, so he steals all the arrows, him and his friends, takes them up the mountainside and hides them, and he gets into huge trouble because if they were under attack, they'd have no weapons to defend themselves. So he's a sort of crazy guy that's always playing pranks, always getting into trouble, and in the middle of battle he tries the most daring, crazy things, and readers really enjoy him because they never know whether he's going to succeed and win the day or if he's going to completely lose out and fail and ruin everything. So he's a really fun character to write. But when I've asked my readers about which characters they like, a lot of them have said they love Ezarra because even though she had all the odds stacked against her, she had such amazing determination and she just pushed on through to make sure that that she triumphed in the end. And even when everyone was against her, she did what she thought was right. Yeah. Definitely.
And, it was hard for her because she was introduced into a whole new world. So it was like she was an immigrant going to a new culture, completely new, and just learning everything, that whole transition period. That was really laid out and well done. But how do you develop these characters? Are they based on people you know, on fiction, nonfiction that you've read in the past?
I think when I first started, I based a few characteristics on some people I knew, but as the series developed, they took on a life of their own. So I made Kyrian cheeky. So every time I came to write a scene with him in it, I'd go, right, what would he do? And I'd just come up with these crazy, wacky ideas and end up putting them in. Roberto, who's the dragon master who has to train Ezarra, he has a massive chip on his shoulder. He has some huge issues from childhood. His father sold him into the hands of the enemy, and he was actually a traitor for many years and developed incredible mental telepathic skills and used them against his own people because he was being forced to. So at the beginning of the story, he's a traitor. Everybody knows he used to be a traitor. Nobody knows whether he's still going to be a traitor or not. Even though he's redeemed himself, there's a lot of doubt around his integrity. And so every scene I write with him has to be through the eyes of mistrust and prejudice and someone who's been treated like that because his own father gave him to the enemy. I mean, it's a pretty dark thing to do to your kids, but yeah.
Definitely. But he seemed like he was coping well.
Yeah, and I think there's different ways. So I do have parents that are rotten parents, and for a few of my characters, and the enemy, Commander Zenz, who delights in enslaving and torturing people, he had a rotten childhood, but he has used his childhood to his experience in a completely different way than Roberto, who's trying to make the best out of his life. So I think you can throw your characters similar problems and they can react in completely different ways depending on their personalities.
Yeah, you did that. What about the world? How do you world build? Is it based on travel, places that you've been?
I lived in Switzerland. So I live in New Zealand, which is a beautiful country, a lot of mountainous terrain and broad open seas and all sorts of gorgeous landscape. But I also lived in Switzerland for 6 years. And one of the things I did in Switzerland when I first arrived in summer was a girlfriend and I walked from the north border of Switzerland to the southern border. And it took us 2 weeks, and we took a tent in our backpack, or I carried the tent, and food and things. And we traveled up through the Alps and then down through beautiful lakes. And we saw, fields full of mountain flowers. We overnighted in my tent in the middle of a hailstorm in the middle of summer. It was crazy. The weather was beautiful, and sort of within 20 minutes, everything closed in, and we just threw the tent up and jumped inside. And and it was hailing, so that was crazy. So there was a lot of inspiration when I went to build Dragon's Hold, which is encircled by mountains and has lakes, and a lot of inspiration came from my time in Switzerland. It was a really beautiful landscape there.
Yeah, that's a crazy adventure. You can see how that plays out in the story.
Yeah. And I mean, there is a lot of mountainous landscape, and there's even a couple of words I use here and there when I've invented languages that actually come from Swiss German, because I speak Swiss German fluently. So that's quite fun, popping those wee nuggets in there.
Wow, how many languages do you speak?
Really, I speak English, even though it might not sound like English as you know it. And I speak Swiss German, and I speak High German, which is a German language. And then I speak a smattering of lots of bits and pieces of lots of languages just through traveling. Yeah.
Oh, it really adds flavor to your book. And it's one of those stories that it wraps around your heart first, and then it just whisks you away on an epic adventure that you can't put down. And you kept me up really late for a couple nights.
I had one reader give a review and say that I ruined her anniversary because she stayed up reading all night the night before, and her husband got really mad because she was too tired the next day.
That's funny. It is a book that you could finish in 5 or 6 hours, maybe straight, maybe 7.
Depends how fast you are. And I've had readers write to me about their emotions, and they say that the way I write is like actually being there, like seeing a movie unfold in front of their eyes, and that they enjoy. It feels like they're actually in the elements, experiencing everything, that they're not just reading about it. And the other aspect is the emotions. When I started writing, I thought I really wanted readers to feel strong emotions when they read my work, and emotions that are really important, things that matter, a sense of family and justice and all of those sort of things. So, yeah, I think I've achieved that. So I'm very pleased with how the series has come out.
You've definitely achieved that. But going back to characters, is it Thorks? Tharuks?
Tharuks, yep.
Tharuks. So their commander and that whole group. Can you tell us a little bit about the evil villains?
Okay, so Commander Zenz came through a world gate, which in our lingo is a portal. So he came through the world gate. Some mages opened a world gate by mistake and broke the world. And he came through, and he brought through a whole lot of equipment with him. And he genetically engineered some monsters, which he developed on Earth. And he has clones living in this medieval world. And a lot of that comes out near the end of the series. You find out a whole lot more about how they came through from Earth and what happened. But right through the series, these people are just like, he turned up and, he grows these things and they're monsters. So the monsters basically kidnap and enslave people and take them to Death Valley, which is an awful place where the Alps have been turned just into barren hillsides. There's no plants, and he's mining for something secret, and nobody knows what it is. That comes out sort of in the 4th and 5th books.
What about the mages and the dragons?
Yeah, so the mages...
There's like a conflict going on.
Yeah, there is actually, between the mages and the dragon riders. So because the mages opened the world gate and let the enemy in 20 years beforehand, everybody's prejudiced against the mages as well. So there's sort of this fight going on. And Dragon Rift is the 3rd book, and that's all about the rift between mages and dragon riders. And Kirian, our cheeky prankster, helps to get bridge the gap and build a better relationship between the mages and the riders. So in books 4 and 5 they can fight together as they used to years ago.
Wow. Do you have any plans for another series after this one, or these two?
Yeah. After this series, there is Riders of Fire Dragon Masters, which are the prequels. So a lot of the main characters who've featured in these books are older Dragon Masters who are at Dragon's Hold, or some of the mages, and the next series will focus on them. So you'll have the lady who used to ride Zarusha before Ezarra did. Her name's Anakisha. We've got Anakisha's dragon, and Dragon Mage, the guy who broke the world, Master Giddy, who's a fabulous character. My readers love him. He's one of those old, wise sort of mages, but not that old. But he's very human and very lovable, and has a great sense of humour. And they have dragons that have a sense of humour too. So, Erob, Roberto's dragon, a lot of my readers love Erob because he's got such a crazy sense of humour. He's always teasing his rider. So, yeah, that's about the mages and how they fit in. And the next series, there's also Dragon Spy and Dragon Healer. So they're all some of the main dragon masters, and how they got their dragons and how they broke the world and let the enemy in.
Wow. It's so amazing. So now I can see how your adventure for 2 weeks, walking across Switzerland, built the excitement and the adventure and the landscape, the world building involved, and then having a son. Do you just have one son?
No, I have 4 children.
You have 4? So having children, I can see where all the social issues were important to you to add to the mix.
Mm-hmm. And also I think that they just arose as I wrote, you want good conflict in a world to create the potential for stories. So there were a lot of issues that just cropped up and made them matter and made them important and gave people characters they could understand and care for. So I think it's been important. And dragons are so much fun. There's so many crazy things you can do with dragons. Like we have dragon acrobatics and dragon races and all sorts of dragon stuff, as well as just flaming and, archery from Dragonback and all of those cool things that you can do with the dragon. Yeah.
Definitely. And it's amazing how many cultures around the world really like dragons.
Yeah, there's a lot of dragons in many, many cultures, you're right. So these are more sort of Western dragons than Asian dragons. But, there's dragons in a lot of cultures.
It's amazing. So do you have a secret that you're going to share with your viewers?
Ooh, we do actually. There's a new box set coming out called Enchanted Kingdoms, and I've been invited to put a story in that, and it's going to be raising funds for autism. And the story that we're writing is called The Drucky Twins, which AJ Ponder and I are co-authoring, and that is about dragon shapeshifters. So that's an urban fantasy fairy tale retelling of Snow White and Rose Red, and it's going to be in that box set. So that will be lots of fun.
Definitely. And a good organization to raise funds for.
Yeah, it's Puzzle Piece, who care for children with autism and help support children who have autism. So that was fantastic. Yeah.
That is exciting. Good for you. Is there any particular reason why you chose that organization?
So someone else was organising the charity, and they chose it. I think some of the authors who are participating had children with autism, so I think that was a great cause. It was something close to home for them.
All right. And now when we go through this fantasy, it doesn't follow the traditional lines of a fantasy. How did you divert yourself from falling into the same niche?
That's an interesting question. I just wanted to write something that took the characters on a journey that spoke to them and spoke to me. So when I originally wrote book 1 and book 2, they were one book, and they were just so big. And I had a lot of people say, you have to split them out. You have to split them out. And that was part of my 9-year process in writing the books, was actually splitting them out so they could stand on their own. So there's a lot of backstory missing from Ezarra when you read it. And I have people ask me about it. And I'm like, you have to read book 2. And when they read Dragon Hero, they realize that a lot of the backstory comes in there, and you find out why some of the things in Ezarra happen, because you find out more about her parents and her family. So she's gone in the first chapter, right, Denise? She leaves home and she's gone. She meets a dragon and she's gone, and she never expected that. And then everybody said, what happened to her brother? And you find out in Dragon Hero what happened to her brother, that within a few hours they were under attack, and the Tharoks come over and attack the village, and his parents, or her parents, their parents, father's put into prison, and the mother has to go off on a dangerous quest. And suddenly Ezarra's brother has to start rescuing people because everybody needs help, and he's got a sword, so he's out there to help. So yeah, so it was a little bit different than a traditional fantasy, but it was lots of fun.
Yeah, of course. It was crazy fun. I mean, you just had to follow it through to the end. But what about the elements of magic and make-believe? You seem to have a clear-cut destination in mind. Is it something we find out in later books?
Do you mean with the mages and the...
With all the characters, there were just different elements that seem consistent. Where sometimes when you read fantasy, they divert, and there's a lot of different kinds of either magic or shapeshifters, different things going on. But you seem to be consistent throughout the book. And it just was really easy to follow, easy to understand. Everything made sense together, and it flowed. And it did bring you to all those highs and lows.
So I think that's one of the important things when you well build as an author, is when you start out writing, the temptation is to put everything. Oh, I can have magic, and I can have time travel, and I can have portals, and I can have, dragons that shift into lions, or, whatever it is. And you end up with something that isn't quite as cohesive. And I think if you establish some parameters and you make sure that there are a lot of things that cannot happen, like if someone uses magic, if there's a cost to it, or, if someone imprints with a dragon, that it happens a particular way, and that's consistent throughout the book. The personalities may be different, the events may be different, but having that world magic or those world laws and having them consistent helps the readers feel like they're coming home every time they open a new book. They read it and they go, yes, I'm back here again. And it gives them a sense of homecoming, which I really enjoy.
So how do you keep everything in order? Do you use storyboards? Do you have graphs?
I have a massive Excel sheet. It's just crazy. I have over there's lots of characters, but I have over 40 points of view in the series, and it's just crazy. So trying to remember who has been where and what they're doing. So I keep big Excel sheets of the whole timeline for each book. So I have all the characters listed, and then where they are and what they're doing. They're all color-coded, and every time I start plotting a new book, I make a new one. I tend to plot the first third of the book, and I know where the next thirds are going and how it ends, and then I write the first third, and then I figure out all the rest, and then just go and write it. So it's a lot of fun. But I have sheets of whose eye color and what dragon they ride, and whether the dragon's male or female, and there's massive Excel sheets. They're quite funny. Yeah, so that's my series Bible.
Okay, that makes sense, because I love the way you ended it. So many times in fantasy, they leave you with a wicked cliffhanger. So you're waiting like, luckily all the 6 books are available, right? But typically you're waiting for the next book. Like, really? Did you really leave me with that? But yours kind of leaves you satisfied where you're like, okay, I can wait a little while for the next book, but not too long, but a little while.
So what I tend to do is finish an entire story so it's complete, and then I introduce a new element with a cliffhanger on it. So at the end of Ezarra's story, things are complete and there's a really nice resolution, and then bang, some bad news comes and you're left hanging. So there's a little cliffhanger. But I have had some of my readers say all these books end on cliffhangers, and I'm like, they don't race up the cliff and stop. They race and finish, and then there's something new that comes in. So that works quite well. But I do have to admit, on Dragon Strike, I got halfway through writing the book and I was like, there's just too much war. I cannot resolve this within the the size of that book. So for Dragon Strike, I've got a copy of that here. That one actually ends on a wicked cliffhanger. This little book leaves all the main characters in absolute peril, and you're left hanging where all this terrible stuff has gone wrong, and you have to wait for the next book. But it's out now, so that's really good.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing so much about the series. What was your favorite book growing up?
My favorite book growing up? I really enjoyed Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern, and I think that's influenced me a lot. But I had lots of favorite books. I don't think I had one favorite. I was reading all the time. I absolutely loved reading. What about you? What did you enjoy?
I enjoy a little bit of everything, actually. I just love to read. So it's a perfect fit.
Yeah.
But
excellent.
I really enjoyed your story. I'm looking forward to more and seeing what you come up with next. So thank you again.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to join you.
My pleasure. Until next time, keep asking questions. And if you want a great, seriously, epic dragon series, this is it. Ezarra. We'll see you soon.